Hello, Delaware County District Library patrons and staff, Geek Fest viewers, and anyone else watching live on our YouTube channel. I'm Dan from the Outreach Department. Today I'm joined by Lori from the Ostrander branch. And behind the scenes, running the show, is Nicole from the Communications Department. We are pleased to host this fabulous author-illustrator duo this afternoon.
Yes, you're going to be blown away with these two fellows. Today we have Dan Santat and Minh Lê joining us as the keynote presentation for our virtual Great Geek Fest, or Geek Week. And as a quick teaser, tonight at 7 p.m., tune in to hear from graphic novelist Vera Brosgol.
As you may know, every year our library hosts a free Comic-Con for all ages. And this year celebrates our 5th anniversary. Today's presentation is streaming live on YouTube, and we will be taking your questions for the authors at the end. You can begin typing them into the chat now for us to ask Dan and Minh later. As a reminder, books written and illustrated by this pair can be purchased from our book partner, Beanbag Book, located in beautiful downtown Delaware, Ohio. And finally, kindness and compassion are the rules for comments written during this talk.
Without any further ado, please allow me to introduce Minh Lê. Minh Lê is the award-winning author of Drawn Together, winner of the 2019 Asian Pacific American Award for Literature, Let Me Finish, an NPR Best Book of 2016, and The Perfect Seat. He is also the author of Green Lantern Legacy, his debut middle-grade graphic novel for DC Comics. In addition to writing books, Minh is a federal early childhood policy expert and has worked in education at the national, state, and local level, both in and out of the classroom. He received his bachelor's in psychology from Dartmouth College and a master's in education policy from Harvard University. Minh was also named one of the 100 coolest dads in America by Fatherly in 2018, landing somewhere between LeBron James and Barack Obama. Outside of spending time with his wonderful wife and kids, Minh's favorite place to be is in the middle of a good book.
And our co-featured presenter is the one and only Dan Santat. Not only does Dan Santat have a super cool first name, but he is also a Caldecott Award winner, graduate of the Art Center College of Design, and has published over 100 books for children. He's the illustrator of the award-winning Drawn Together with Minh, and the pair also have another title, Lift, that they released earlier this year in May. Dan's most notable titles include The Adventures of Beekle, The Unimaginary Friend, which won the Caldecott Medal in 2015, the #1 New York Times best-selling road trip time travel adventure, Are We There Yet?, and the New York Times best-selling book, After the Fall, How Humpty Dumpty Got Back Up Again, which was named Best Book of the Year on numerous publications, including NPR and the New York Public Library. Dan lives in Southern California with his wife, 2 kids, and many, many pets. Welcome, Minh and Dan. How you guys doing today?
Doing well. Thanks for having me.
All right.
Thank you for that lovely introduction.
Yeah.
Thank you. I would just like to clarify that I was number 101 on the Fatherly Best Fathers list. I just missed it by an inch. So watch your back, LeBron. Coming for you.
You take the crown for him now that he's gotten the.
Oh, I'll fight tooth and nail to get on that list. Well, outraged, quite frankly. Anyway, thank you for having us.
All right.
We're all the way out here in California, and it's nice to have everyone on, well, actually not just Delaware, but the entire country or whoever's watching this streaming live. So, Minh, I haven't seen you in a while since this wonderful pandemic took place. I hope you're doing well.
It's nice to see you again because the plan was for the book to come out and then us to go around.
Oh yeah, we were gonna go on a big,
Yeah.
huge adventure. People were gonna lavish us with gifts and everything like that. And now it's just like, hey, why don't you just talk into a black screen for 45 minutes anyway? So I guess we should begin by reading our story, and then we'll talk a little bit about the processes of making this book, and then we'll take some questions and answers. That sound good? So how do you want to do this? Do you want to read the narrative and then I can read the word bubbles, or you can read the whole thing? Or
I think the time we did that, yeah, why don't I do the narrative and then you do the funny sound effects and the speech bubbles.
All right, sounds good.
That worked well the last time we did it. Like I said, if the pandemic hadn't hit, we would have had this down to a science by now. But you're lucky you get to see this worked out in real time.
Right.
This is the geeky behind the scenes version of the reading.
Yeah. Oh, there we go. Here we go. Lift by Minh Lê. Caldecott medalist Dan Santat. I just wanted to throw that out there.
I should put one of the top 100 coolest
One of
dads.
the top 100 dads. Fine.
Yeah.
You win, Min.
Okay, so Lift.
Here we go.
Okay, so Lift. The story begins with this family waiting outside of an elevator.
Okay. Yeah.
And then,
One day.
Hi, my name is Iris. When I'm feeling a bit down, there's one thing that always cheers me up. Pushing elevator buttons. Luckily, that's my job. Up or down, our floor or the lobby, I always get to push the button.
Tuesday. You want to read it off the screen?
Oh, yeah.
Can you see it? You're reading the first draft.
Tuesday, then there's Wednesday.
Wednesday.
And I always get to push the button.
Thursday. Ding.
Until one day,
Oh.
the little button pushes it and betrayal. And Iris's parents go walking out. They're super happy because the brother got to push the button and it's super exciting. But then trailing behind is a less excited Iris.
Not everyone is thrilled. Friday.
So they're back at the elevator.
Ding.
The elevator opens up and Iris gets super excited. She rushes into the elevator.
Ding.
But then,
Uh-oh.
Betrayed again. Enough is enough. I know it's wrong, but I can't help myself. I push all the buttons. And she pushes all the buttons.
Iris!
She got that devious look in her eyes. And now we slowly descend. Ding. 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 You can see them getting more and more frustrated as they descend on every single floor. So they get to the lobby and they go out. You see there's a repairman fixing the other elevator, which is out of order. And the dad goes off to get the car, and Iris waits there skulking. But then she sees the repairman throw something in the garbage. So she looks over, and he goes over to play with the baby because babies are super cute.
Babies are awesome.
And she looks in the garbage can, and she gets super excited. She looks, and there's a elevator button just hanging out there in the trash. So she reaches in and picks it up. But then she hears that her mom is calling her.
Iris.
So she goes running off with the elevator button still in her hand. So when I get back home, I just want to be alone. And she goes to her closet. She throws in her backpack.
Her normal closet.
Her very normal and very neat closet, actually. She closes the door. And then she remembers the elevator button in her pocket. So she takes it out and she tapes it up to the door, or next to the door. She says, wishing I could be anywhere but here. Then she just pushes it for fun. and walks away.
Ding.
Then it lights up. So she turns around, the door starts to open, and her closet is no longer a closet, but now this magical jungle scape. So she walks inside and gasps. She looks around, and she sees this majestic tiger hanging out on a tree limb.
Ding dong.
But there's a sound coming back from the apartment, so she turns around.
Ding
She
dong.
looks in,
Rah, click.
she closes the door, and she's super excited by this amazing thing that just happened. But then she walks out, and she sees that a babysitter is here, and her parents are all dressed up for a night on the town, back when you could still have nights out on the town. But she sees that there's a leaf in her hair, so she shakes it out. Then the parents say, "We'll be back soon, sweetie. Love you," and they're off. Then Iris looks over at her brother's stuffed tiger, which, if you look closely, says Iris on the stomach, so it used to be hers. And that gives her the idea to go back up to her room, to that elevator. So she starts to run. But then the babysitter says, "Hang on, first dinner, and then I brought games." She has this board game called Out of This World. So then they're sitting down to a nice, calm, relaxing dinner, which is not at all calm or relaxing.
Fantastic dinner. Amazing.
Then they're trying to play this Out of This World game, but the brother is a little bit young, a little bit.
We're all winners.
Enthusiastic.
We're all winners.
Then it's time to brush teeth, and you can see the little brother is just right up in her space. He just wants to be as close to his big sister as possible. And then it's time to go to bed. And the brother hands the tiger and says, "Night, night," asking her to give it a kiss. So she's a little skeptical at first, gives a little bit of a very expert side eye, but then she gives it a kiss. Mwah. And the babysitter leaves, turns off the light,
Click.
but Iris is not asleep. She gets out of bed and says, "Finally."
Click.
Goes over to the elevator or the closet, push the button, and then
Ding.
the elevator button lights up, and all of a sudden things start to float off the ground. Her teddy bear, pencil, and then even she starts to float. In her whole room, she's levitating above this door as you can see a light coming out from it, and then the door starts to open, and her closet is again transformed, and now she's in this space station. And she's floating inside in zero gravity. She sees a spacesuit. So she puts it on. And then she unlocks the hatch and then floats out. And as she looks out, she sees the entire world just down below her. And now she has all the space she could possibly want. But suddenly she hears someone's crying on her intercom. So she turns around. And she pulls herself back into the spaceship, the space shuttle, and closes the hatch. The light goes off. She hears this adorable crying coming back from the house. So she floats back into her room. And she touches down and goes running off down the hall. And when she gets across, she sees the babysitter trying to put her brother to sleep with very little success. And she says, "I know exactly what you want." So she pulls out their favorite book. It's called Summit. And then they sit down and they read. And the little brother is so happy to be in his big sister's lap. And the babysitter is very relieved to no longer have a screaming baby. So she goes off to the other room to to put up her feet for a few minutes.
Saturday.
So the next morning, Iris is woken up. There's a little cat helping her get up. There she is. Then she looks over and you can guess what she's looking at. And she says, in the morning, I wake up excited for my next visit. But then something holds me back. She looks down. And she sees a picture frame with a picture of her and her brother. So she looks out of her room, goes across the hallway, and she opens her brother's door, and
Up.
little brother's awake, and he reaches out for Iris. So she takes him across the hallway and takes him to her magic closet door. Okay. And then she picks her brother up and lets him push the button because, after all, everyone can use the lift sometimes.
Ding.
And the elevator button lights up again, and the door opens.
Oh.
And as they get ready to go through, the cat is following them behind, and you can see little snowflakes starting to drift through the doorway. And then there, Iris and her brother are off on a new adventure on this like beautiful mountainscape. You see the cat following through. So that is the final adventure in this book of Lift. And there are the brother and sister again standing in front of this magical doorway. So that is Lift.
All right. Yay. Nice to read that one with you again. So I guess now we should take some time. Min, you want to talk about your process, and then I'll talk about mine, so we can just like cut to your camera.
Yeah, sounds good.
Cool.
So yeah, it was great. It was right after we when Drawn Together was about to come out, and our publisher was like, we really loved how that book, how you worked together on that book. We'd love to do another one. So I was trying to think of another book that I could do with you, and I remember thinking that, well, I was at an age with my two boys. Whenever we'd be out and we'd see an elevator, they would fight over who gets to push which button. And if one pushes the outside button, the other one gets to push the inside button. And it was like this whole negotiation. And I also had a flashback to when my youngest son, Ezra, was a baby, even younger than the baby brother in this book. I remember stepping onto an elevator and watching his eyes as like the door closed and he started looking around. And then as like the elevator goes up and the doors open and we step out onto this like whole new world. And I could just see the look in his eyes. I was like, this must be the most amazing thing for a baby to be like, I walked into this random metal box and then all of a sudden I'm in a different world. So my natural thought next was like, okay, so what would happen if an elevator actually did take you to a whole new world? So those two things, the fact that I've never met a child who didn't like to push elevator buttons, and just the kind of like possibly surreal nature for a child of being in an elevator kind of gave birth to this story. But what was really interesting about this process, and Dan and I talk a lot about like the way we collaborate on a picture book, is that I wrote this manuscript and I always try to take a very light touch with a picture book manuscript. And in this case, I took a super light touch because I would write the manuscript up until the point of Iris pushing the elevator button and the doors open up. And then the manuscript is basically, Dan, you take it from here. And for me as an author, it's like the joy of writing a picture book like this is the collaboration and like seeing where the artwork comes up and what someone like Dan can come up with. So it's one part laziness of like, oh, I'll let Dan take
stop.
But also it's like it's building that collaboration into the manuscript and being like, okay, I'm gonna take it this far, and I want to see what Dan wants to illustrate for this other side of the door. So it really is, this book is one of the really the better examples I've seen of that type of collaboration. And so it was really fun for me getting bits of the book back was almost like having like your own magic elevator button because I had no idea what was on the other side of that door.
Right.
And so the sketches started coming in. It's an amazing experience.
You look at it, you're like,
Roscoe, what?
What? If you could switch over to my shared screen here.
Yeah.
Let's see. Perfect. Excellent. So, feel free to comment at any time. So, as you know, I've done over 100 books for kids, mostly picture books, but I have been known to do some graphic novels. One of which is Sidekick down here, which came out way back in 2010. Actually, graphic novels were the thing that made me fall in love with reading when I was a kid. I'm best known for this book. And I think a lot of people think I'm very comfortable doing picture books, but honestly, I feel like maybe I'm more comfortable doing graphic novels with the storytelling. I was always a huge fan of comics. Every Sunday I'd pick up the Sunday comics and, I would copy pictures of characters that I liked, one of which, was Garfield. And I always just kept practicing drawing, like copying pictures of Garfield and things like that. Calvin and Hobbes, Blondie, Beetle Bailey, all those things. And, I actually took the time to teach myself how to make comics. This is a book that's still in publication. It's called How to Draw Comics the Marvel Way. Fantastic book. If anybody's interested in learning how to make their own comics, this is a great book. I know there's a lot of you out there that say, oh, I can't even draw a stick figure. Well, you're in luck, because this book literally starts with stick figures, and then you start fleshing out muscles and how to draw hands and faces and putting costumes on there. And then learning how to panel and putting in word balloons. It teaches you things from end to end. Fantastic. Also, online's a really great resource. A lot of people are just sharing their comics online. There's a whole community of people on message boards or what have you that can always give you tips and give you some really great advice. It would have came in handy if I was a kid and I had the internet at my disposal to learn how to make comics, because comic industry can be very friendly if you find the right circles, and they'll just be very open to giving you all kinds of advice. So let's talk a little bit about the process of Lift. Okay, so let me start by talking about the narrative of pictures versus the narrative of words, because both of them really, you're communicating a story, but it just is a slight variation on how you do it. So for this case, I did a book way back in, I want to say it was like 2007. It was called Oh No, or How My Science Project Destroyed the World. It was written by this great author named Mac Barnett. And in the story, this manuscript was like only 112 words, the entire manuscript. And a lot of it had a lot of art notes. And the basic story was about a girl who builds a giant robot for a science fair project. And then the robot goes awry and starts terrorizing the city. And so she then has to go back home and grow a giant frog to battle the giant robot to save the city. And so, I'll get art notes like this. Girl runs home to an elaborate lab in her garage. She grabs a frog and, using her sophisticated lab instruments, grows it into a giant frog to battle the giant robot running rampant throughout the city. Now, that's one way to do it. You can write the text. You can create the narrative with words and just let the reader visualize it in their heads, or you can just take a two-page spread and illustrate that same sequence. And a lot of the importance about narrative is having the connection from panel to panel and being able to design pages so that you know which panel goes next. It has to have a regular flow to it, so you usually go from left to right. If you are in Japan, for instance, Japanese manga, it's actually the opposite direction. You go from right to left. And a lot of that just comes with practice, trying to figure things out. But, in lieu of a written narrative, having illustrations here in sequence could be a lot more fun to look at, could be just as informative. I find that certain people have certain preferences. Some people actually can comprehend a story better with pictures over text. I always like to say, when you're in an airplane, the airline safety cards, you're not taking the time reading the text on how to handle yourself when the plane is going to, hit the water. It's usually like a 3-image panel of how to put on the safety vest and all that. It really just gets gobbled up in the mind a lot easier. And so let's talk about translating script. Here is the manuscript that Min sent me. And as you can see here, there's like certain little details that we went back and forth and kind of just talked about, because a picture book is 40 pages and it's really hard to fit an entire narrative into that. I mean, I already knew that I was going to be doing a lot of paneling to build up a lot of moments. And so here, like in Min's first draft, you see that when when Iris originally presses the elevator button, it opens up into an elevator cabin, and then she goes into it, presses the button, and then the elevator actually takes her to this different world. And for me, like, that was going to really cut into my page count. And so I decided I had to eliminate that point and then just have the button activate the closet door, and then the door would open to a magical world. And that, that saved me some panels.
And that also ended up keeping the momentum going a little bit more, because if you had to stop every time, get into an elevator and go up, that would have actually like bogged it down.
Well, there's something charming about that, because I always thought it would be pretty cute, like if I put in like elevator music, like there's just a whole thing about elevators where, kind of waiting in an elevator is part of the experience in itself, right? Mm-hmm. So there was a part where I was contemplating like, oh, should I put like little elevator music like that people would only understand just as a joke? But yeah, I mean, if we kept doing this, like it was gonna just turn into a bigger thing. Like it was gonna turn into like I was gonna end up eating like 1 or 2 spreads, and right. It got more expensive. So I took the script, and then what you do is that you just start doing really light, simple thumbnail sketches, just to pace out the story, try to make it fit into 50 pages. And let's just take this little sequence right here. So, this sequence here that said, "At home, I just want to be alone." So this is the scene where Iris is going into her room. She takes out the elevator button. She tapes it onto the door, presses the button. It opens up, and, she gets out into the jungle. So, just here we go. That was like, what, 2.5 paragraphs of just describing that whole scene. And so here it is in sketch form, really simple. Like if you look at it and you really kind of concentrate or squint your eyes, you can see the sequence happening. Typically, like only I can understand this. This is not even something I would show my editor. This is just something that I map out for myself. And then once I get the flow going and it feels okay, and actually, so I was trying to fit this originally into 40 pages. Didn't work out so well, and I had to ask the editor if I could expand it into 56, which is a big ask in the publishing world, and they actually were perfectly fine with that. And so thankfully I had some room to stretch out to build moments in a scene. So here's the sequence where she first tapes the elevator button to the door, and you can see in page 22, 23, she goes out into the jungle. 24, 25, she meets the tiger, and let's just see how closely I stick to that sketch. So here's the first pass. I actually had Iris's hair differently, and they thought that the hair looked a little too grown up for her. I'm just placing type, just trying to get the feel of the flow of everything. And originally, actually, in the first draft, she didn't go into the jungle. I had her entering the Himalayan mountains, and she meets some hikers, and she just waves at them. And then the elevator door, the doorbell rings, and then she goes back in. And so there you can see, like, that's how I kind of worked it into the ending with the summit picture book and them going out into the mountains. So with the second pass, I thought, we had incorporated more of, the stuffed tiger into the story. We wanted to have something where Iris was being inspired by things that she saw. So the tiger was a great device to use as a way to send her into the jungle. And so here's the sketches of her going into a room and dropping off the backpack and having the light turn on and say ding. And then she goes off into the jungle. This is a pretty tight sketch. Usually when I get really excited about a spread, I'll draw that thing out perfectly. And here she is. She encounters the tiger. The doorbell rings. She closes the door, and so forth. And here's the final pass, where I start. There was a sequence here. If you look above the lamp, here is the picture of Iris and her brother in a frame. There was actually a moment where she has to pause and decide that she wants to go get her brother, and that came at like the very last moment when we were doing the story. We're trying to figure out, well, what is it that makes her want to share this moment with her kid? And so we thought that, her embracing this moment of seeing a picture of her brother with her at a happy moment was something that would pull them in. So she's dropping off the backpack, closes the door, reaches into her pocket. And I'm showing these in little snippets because the more panels you add, you're slowing down time. You're trying to make this moment a little bit more intimate, and you're focusing on little details. So like this panel right here, it's just a panel of her looking into her pocket, looking at the elevator button. And here's a picture of her like taping it onto the wall, pressing the button, walking away. Ding. And I always like the glow on her face when the door opens. And so I wanted to incorporate that. And so as you can see, like I shoved that panel in. I thought it worked really well. And then, you want to have the big reveal at the page turn. And so here we are turning the page, and she gets to the jungle, which, I knocked out on the first go because it was just such a fun spread. And so here she is. She's looking at the tiger. The doorbell rings. Ding dong. Ding dong. She closes the door. Click. So, that's really the gist of it. You probably want to know how you make comics. I have a couple pieces of advice. I've worked on other projects. I've worked with Dave Pilkey on Ricotta's Mighty Robot, and I've done my own interpretations of Dave Pilkey's work. Here was something that I did with Dave Pilkey at a Dogman event. So, I think one of the best ways to learn how to do comics is just to like imitate other people and kind of just get the hang of it. Maybe tell a certain sequence, but tell it in your own way. So here's an example of a sequence from Dogman. So you learn by imitation. So here's a cat that says, "Help, it's a bomb." Officer Knight and Greg ran to defuse the bomb. Which wire should I cut, red or green? Grr, okay, green it is. And so, snip, kablooey. Oh no, I forgot dogs are colorblind. Wee-oo, wee-oo, wee-oo. And soon, how do you feel, old friend? Rough. Me too. So now I'm going to show you my interpretation of that very same scene. Help! It's a bomb! Officer Knight and Greg ran to defuse the bomb. Which wire should I cut, red or green? Grr! Okay, green it is. Snip. Kablooey! Oh no, I forgot dogs are colorblind. Wee-oo, wee-oo, wee-oo. And soon, how do you feel, old friend? Rough. Me too. Now, my interpretation has a very different feel to it, but it's still my version, and you learn a tremendous amount just by doing that as a little practice. And this is my version of Dogman. Maybe you kids at home might want to do that with your own stories. And now if you want to start, I suggest starting with like simple stories. If you read a Garfield comic, they're just 3 panels. And then from there, maybe you can start from a 3-panel comic, maybe tell a joke, maybe do a comic about how to do an activity, how to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, for example. I was thinking of doing a comic about how to parallel park because no one here in California knows how to do that. So you always start with simple 3-panel stories, and maybe, you feel comfortable with that. You move on to like 1-page comics. Kazuki Buishi, who does the Amulet comics, he used to do a monthly thing where it was 1-page comic day, and everyone would just submit comics, and we'd all share them on a little message board that we had as a secret. Here's a comic that I did for the Creative Project, which was a book that came out a couple years ago. It's a little short story called The Boy Next Door. And that was the prompt that I got from this great comic writer, Mariko Tamaki. She gave me this prompt that said The Boy Next Door, and she asked me to do a 4-page comic on it. And so I have this comic about this brother and sister who have to go next door across the street to meet the new kid, and as time goes on, they discover that the new kid is actually aliens that are using a little boy robot as their like Land Rover to like explore life on Earth. And so the boy's freaking out, and the girl is trying to figure out like, are you okay? And he now knows his secret, but he's too paranoid to tell his sister. And then they meet the boy, and they're like, hey, do you want to come over to our house and play? And that's The Boy Next Door. Currently, I just finished my latest graphic novel. It's called The Aquanaut. I spent 10 years on it. I normally don't spend that much time on comics, but reason being is because I was working on so many other projects. Don't be intimidated. Doing your first graphic novel is always kind of a scary thing, but then once you finish it, it's like climbing a mountain. And oddly enough, once you're done with it, you can't wait to do your next one. And so that's my presentation right there. And now I guess Min and I are open to taking questions and answers.
Yeah.
Yeah. So thanks for a great presentation and conversation. We do have a few questions from our viewers for you guys, and they'll pop up here.
Whose work more shapes the beginning of a collaboration? Does the conception of the book begin with visual development and little plot, or started with mostly story written and illustration comes later? From my experience, it goes either way. But honestly, you know, if you're going to spend that much time going into a big project like that, a good concept is really important. So, I mean, for me, like I'll spend months, sometimes years, working out a good story, working out the storyline, and then actually doing a lot of trimming, leaning, making it lean, realizing, because sometimes you'll build up entire scenes that you realize is just fluff that you didn't need. And so, you know, typically, like depending on which publisher you go to Scholastic, they want about 126 pages for a graphic novel. You go to First Second, you know, you're looking somewhere around 240, 260, but all those pages really all add up. It sounds like you have a lot, but I mean, for example, like when I was working on Sidekicks, a fight sequence would happen, and then before you know it, you're eating up 60 pages of that comic. And in the actual comic, like maybe that took up 5 minutes of real time in the story. So, you know, different events create different things. And yeah, so I mean, the concept really is a great map to figuring out what is the best use of your time.
Yeah, for me, like for picture books, I feel like a lot of the picture books that I write start out with like a 1 or 2 sentence concept. I think for both Drawn Together and Lift, I think the first thing we shared with you was just like a 2-sentence pitch, right? And it's like being able to boil down a story to its most like essential elements, I think is a really useful exercise. Even for a graphic novel, I did a one for DC Comics called Green Lantern Legacy, and that one still I could boil down to like a 2 or 3 sentence synopsis. And I think that for me, a lot of times I think of a picture book, especially, as I'll have the concept, and it's almost like you wake up from a dream, and like you remember the vague point of the dream, but I don't, and like I kind of know what it looks like, but not really. So it's like you just have like this like vague sense of the story, and that's enough to get started. And then when you're working with an illustrator like Dan, you kind of see where it goes, and then it slowly starts like fleshed out over time, which is really cool.
Right. Sometimes you learn new things while you're making the comic.
Yeah. There's another. Okay, I'll read this one. When writing Green Lantern Legacy, what were some of the challenges that came with writing within a pre-established universe and working within constraints of DC Comics mandates? Yeah, so it was an amazing opportunity to get a call from DC Comics and have them say like, "Oh, we're about to write this new line of graphic novels for kids, and we'd like to invite you to write a story." And my first reaction was like, "I think you have the wrong number because I write picture books," but luckily they weren't, and it was daunting at first because you're like, there is so much history there, and there's so much literal legacy within each character that you want to work off of. So I actually asked my editor, "Can you just send me like all of the back matter for Green Lantern so I can read it?" Because for me, I want to create a new character that was still true to the essence of Green Lantern, but also as consistent as possible with the history of the character. So they sent me a box like this big of like all the old Green Lanterns. And so I was up late reading them. I had this moment of like, this really is the dream. I'm getting paid to read comics. But it's a combination of daunting, but also I don't know about you, Dan. I feel like I work better and can be more creative when I have some parameters to bounce off of. So
I think I go for anything really. Yeah,
it's like so I know what the parameters of the Green Lantern character were, so I could like play around with them and figure out how to like subvert them or like kind of twist them. I'm more intimidated by a blank page of just like, okay, just come up with anything, and then that's a harder thing to figure out. So there were definitely parameters. And the great thing about DC Comics is they have like, I'd be send my editor some pages, and she's like, I'm not sure that's how the Green Lantern ring. Let me go down to our Green Lantern desk and have them check this for us to see if this would work. So they had all the experts on hand to tell you exactly like what the mechanics of the universe were, which is an amazing resource. So I hope they answer your question.
Where do you get most of your book ideas? Love the presentation. Min, why don't you start? I'm curious to know where you get your ideas.
A lot of the ideas I get come from family and just like life in general. When I talk to kids and they ask that same question, I'm always like, a lot of it for me, and this may be like my inner Buddhist coming out, is giving myself the space to be present and paying attention to what's going on around me. For like Drawn Together was inspired by my relationship with my grandparents. Lift is inspired by just like watching my kids. And so a lot of the stories kind of start with something that's very true to my experience, then trying to figure out how to kind of like extrapolate that into something that's more broadly applicable and with a little bit of a fantastic twist.
I'm pretty much the same way. I'll look at content. I inhale a lot of content. Like I'll be watching a steady stream of movies all the time, TV shows. But a lot of that time is spent comics and graphic novels. A lot of that time is spent asking myself why this works, why this is good, or sometimes the inspiration comes from other things. So, for example, a lot of people will ask me, like people who really don't have knowledge on drawing, if I'm drawing like a monster or I'm drawing a spaceship, a lot of times you'll have people asking me like, oh my gosh, did you just make that up out of your head? I mean, the answer is yes, but also the answer is, well, this particular thing that I drew is inspired by, a lifelong inspiration of things that I've watched in, movies, films, TV, read in books my entire life. So, if I'm drawing a spaceship, it's probably, inspired by an X-Wing fighter. It's probably inspired by Flash Gordon, or, something that I played in a video game like Mech Warrior or something like that. And, the more you take in, the more knowledge and the more, the more you imbibe, the more you kind of have as tools to use. So, I mean, the same thing goes for drawing. I remember I would copy pictures of superheroes like the X-Men and things like that. But there was like this big step towards being able to create things out of your own head. And part of it was being able to create your own vocabulary. And what I mean by that is, if I was to draw like Captain America, but I'm not very good at drawing noses, then you study how other famous artists like, Arthur Adams or Rick Leonardi or Mark Silverstreet, how they drew noses. And then you would copy, those different types of noses. And then suddenly you have an understanding of, okay, well, here are how 4 or 5 different comic artists draw noses. I could appropriate one and work that into my personal style. So like one of my favorite writers is David Sedaris. And, when I started out, writing fiction, there's something that I love about David Sedaris's writing, where he can take really mundane things, but then turn it into like personal experiences and just have, interesting, humorous thoughts about those things. So a lot of it just comes from taking information, and maybe you'll have an idea, but then you realize that it's an idea that probably would be more interesting if viewed from a different perspective. So a story like Beekle, a lot of imaginary friend tales are told from the perspective of the child who wants the imaginary friend. I decided to take a flip of that, because I remember one time thinking, oh, wow, so the whole purpose of an imaginary friend is to just serve this child. But at the same time, no one asked this imaginary friend if he actually wanted to be with this kid. So I wanted to write the story of an imaginary friend who has to go through the experience of meeting a child for the first time. And, when you think about it, it's like it was something that was freshly original that I hadn't seen before. So I felt like I was onto something. And so A lot of that also comes with boredom. I think that is underplayed. I think the beauty about boredom is that your mind just wanders and just starts making these random connections.
Mhm.
And, you know, a lot of it can be nonsense, but then there are moments where you just stop and you go, wait, I think I've got something here.
And I like that kind of description of like, as a creator, being like the end product of a lifetime of like different influences, right? And then it's like the more that you've taken in, the more material you have to subvert. Like you're talking about Beekle, it's like you've seen enough Imaginary Friend stories to know like what hasn't been done and what twists you could put on it. If you hadn't done that, a lot of that reading and a lot of that intake, then you just wouldn't even know that would be something to do, or that something that would be fresh.
Right.
So yeah.
Yeah. What projects can we expect from you both in the near future? Should we tell them that we're working on another thing?
Yeah, so we're actually working on a third book together that was just announced just a little while ago, and it's called The Blur. And I guess I can tell like just like a little bit about it, right?
I think so. Yeah, I mean, it was already announced in Publishers Weekly.
Yeah. So it's the basic idea is it's a story about a family, like parents and a young child, and they're watching this child grow up, and they're, as parents, as like you do, like are just struggling to keep up with the pace of having a newborn and all that. So and then at some point when the baby starts to walk, it takes off and becomes like this like superhero called the Blur. So it's kind of like a play on words of like the blur as a passage of time, but also the blur as like a baby, as like a told as like a superhero origin story.
It's gonna be a real tearjerker for the parents, because I'm going through that right now. I have a kid in high school, and it's like, well, we're already here. You're already gonna be 15. What else is that? I think you have other things, right?
Yeah, I've got a couple other books in the works, but I'm not sure. I actually haven't announced a ton yet, but there are a lot of irons in the fire for sure.
Got it. Always good to be busy in this business. So for me, like I just showed, I just finished up a graphic novel called The Aquanaut, which should be out. I just found out it's probably going to make it into the spring 2022 list. So the Aquanaut is about these four endangered sea creatures that go down in a sunken ship of a research vessel, and then they take an old diving suit and parts of a submersible, and they convert it into a land walking device. And so they come up to the surface to explore land in hopes of finding this marine reserve that they were originally going to be taken to, in hopes that they can be protected from all the dangers of the waters. So that's The Aquanaut. I'm working on a memoir, another graphic novel simultaneously that I just finished sketches on. And it was about a 3-week trip that I took in Europe. And it was really like a coming of age story, just me finally kind of going through the tough time of junior high, and then eventually getting into a place where I was just really comfortable in my own skin. There's a lot of firsts that I had experienced. You know, it's like the first time I ever fell in love with a girl, first time I ever got a kiss. I snuck into Wimbledon, all kinds of things. I'm doing another Frankenstein book with Samantha Berger. It's called Trick or Treat Frankenstein. I have a new story called A New Day, which was written by this great author. And the premise is Sunday just decides to quit, and the other days of the week have to hold auditions for a new day for the week. What else? I'm doing a choose your own adventure with Laurel Snyder. It's a choose your own adventure picture book called Endlessly Ever After, and it's about Little Red Riding Hood going to grandma's house to deliver the picnic basket, but you get to choose the path that she goes on. And some of them you encounter the 3 little pigs. Another one you encounter Hansel and Gretel. All different kinds of things. It's been a huge process because there's so many paths that can be taken. Yeah, I mean, that's just a few of those things that I'm working on. I've got more, but I don't know.
I have a question with something with the process like the Aquanauts. How much has that story evolved since you first pitched it like 10 years ago?
How much of it?
how much has the story evolved since then, or was it basically the same story that you originally thought
So the story was pretty fleshed out. I had written the draft it was pretty set after the first 2 years. And then, I mean, honestly, what happened was that I ended up doing Ricotta's Mighty Robot with Dave, and that took up a lot of my time, about 2.5 years. Won the Caldecott Medal, which turned into Are We There Yet?, which turned into After the Fall. And then before you know it, 10 years had passed. And I got to a point where, and I have to say, I guess this is a silver lining from this pandemic, that the entire publishing world just kind of slowed down to about a third, to about 50%. And I was doing all this work, and I finally got caught up to the point where I said, I can actually finish this graphic novel. And so for the last, 6 months, I've just been digging at it, and I finally finished it after 10 years. 10 years of working on this thing, I'm finally done. So I'm really excited. I don't think it'll ever take 10 years ever again, because I've kind of taken a conscious decision to say, like, I need to focus on my things rather than just constantly shoving them aside. But the story was pretty solid. It's gone. I'm at my second editor now because the first one retired. But then there was just a lot of trimming, like there were scenes that didn't really need to be in there. Tightening of stories, like moving sequences around, moving scenes around. And it's just a much tighter story. So I mean, that's been mainly what the last 6-7 months have been.
Yeah, for those of you who are watching, Dan might win the award for most productive pandemic, from what I can tell.
Yeah, I think I've completed about 4 picture books. I finished my graphic novel. I just sketched out my memoir graphic novel, which is another 280 pages. And now I'm starting sketches on our next picture book and another picture book with Rhett Miller. Both. How has winning various literary awards throughout your careers affected the ease of getting various works greenlit for publication, if at all? I mean, from my experience, I work with one editor, and if anything, she has been a lot tougher on me about what I should publish, because she's always constantly pushing me, which I'm perfectly fine with. If there's a story she doesn't like, I mean, I know in my head I could probably go sell it someplace else, but my agent would say, like, no, we're sticking with this editor because she pulls out your best work, and I'm totally fine with that. And so since After the Fall, which was published, almost 3 years now, I think I've had a little bit of writer's block. I've been struggling a little bit trying to come up with something that can appease my editor. I think just the other day I came up with an idea, and it was like you said, it was something that really fit well in 1 or 2 sentences. And sometimes it takes that long. Sometimes it takes 2.5 years to figure something out. But then once it kind of falls into place, the rest just falls into place super easily. Now, I have this concept, and it's just a matter of deciding what message I want to convey with that concept.
Yeah. As far as like awards, I think for me, it's more just the awards being the culmination as the end product of like a good working relationship, right? So it's like I have good relationships with the editors I've worked with. So then it's easier. I can pitch them a 1 or 2 sentence concept instead of being like, when you're first starting out, you have to have the entire manuscript kind of like polished and clean and like ready to go. But having worked together with people, I can throw out an idea and be like, that sounds great, and let's go for it. I think the award stuff is probably more relevant on the editor side when they're trying to pitch it to their sales team or whoever the money people are, and they can be like, this duo has won this award. There's a little bit extra juice for when they're trying to get something approved.
Or promoted, definitely.
Exactly.
Yeah. I mean,
I would say having the little golden sticker on the book is super helpful.
Right, absolutely. Yeah, it just kind of gives you clout a little bit. I mean, but that's something that, it spent years for me. Like, you got it on your 3rd book. For me, it was like 10 years. I'm just trying to...
But then I get even though we didn't win a Caldecott, our books still have Caldecott medalist on it, so it gets that little bit of a
right. Yeah. Well, maybe with the blur, no.
So after this whole pandemic
Mhm.
and maybe being cooped up, where would you want a magic elevator to take you?
I have two. One, I haven't seen my parents since March. So I think, what would happen is that I would probably take that elevator and I'd go see my parents. I'd be like, Mom, Dad, I'm here. And they'd be like, you shouldn't be here because there's a pandemic. You should go. And like, it'd probably literally be like a 2-minute disappointment. Like, oh, okay, bye, Mom and Dad. The other one was I was supposed to go to Japan. I was supposed to tour in Japan for 3 weeks. And my family was like really excited. We were all going to go, to Japan and like tour the country for 3 weeks. And like, I wouldn't mind cheating and going over to Japan. Another one was I'd illustrated the 90th anniversary for The Little Engine That Could, and then Dolly Parton had invited us to go do a presentation over at Dollywood in Tennessee, and we were going to go get to meet her and stuff like that, and that was taken from me too. So yeah, selfishly, I would use my that or get some donuts. I haven't had a donut in a while.
I would probably say right before the summer before the pandemic hit, I got to go back to Vietnam with my family and see my grandmother, who's like 98 now. If I had a magic elevator, but when we said goodbye, the plan was for me to come back this coming year. So I wouldn't mind popping over there and saying hi. And there's also a little donut shop next to her place, so I can go get donuts as well.
You're father of the year. You're dad of the year. I see it now. Jealous. I want to call you dad.
All right. Well, thank you again to Dan and Min for joining us. We also want to thank the Delaware County District Library for providing us with your visit, Great Geek Week, the Author Village, Beanbag Books, and all the partners who helped make today's visit possible.
Yeah,
Don't forget. Don't forget at 7 p.m. we have Vera Bruskel joining us right here on YouTube.
Hey, Vera.
So grab.
Please, if you have an opportunity to buy books, please buy independent. Please buy from an independent bookstore. They can really use it.
Yeah.
So grab a quick bite to eat, maybe a few munchies, and we'll see you right back here in a couple hours with Mandy, Shannon, and Vera. Bye.
Take care. Thank you very much. Have a great weekend.